Stacey Washington. Does that name ring a bell? You may have heard her on Fox News, CNN, or our sister network, Urban Family Talk. She's proven to be a champion for biblical values. I'm excited to announce that beginning Monday, August 6th, you can hear Stacey on American Family Radio. Listen for Stacey on the Right weekday afternoons from 2 until 3 Central, just after Focal Point.
And Wolf, just to give you a sense as to what's happening right now, you can hear there is a chorus of boos and other chants from this Trump crowd here in Tampa, Florida.
They dare me to say impeach him. Today I say impeach 45.
To anyone who remembers the Democrats of the 1960s, the 90s, or even 3 years ago, it's all very confusing. That party is dead.
He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy.
I think Donald Trump is a fascist. I think everything he stands for is disgusting.
This isn't politics anymore. It's the world's dumbest religion.
That is pure racism. And the president is cynically using that racism to appeal to his base.
It's all very confusing. That party is dead. It's been replaced by a new one whose entire platform could be say no to Trump.
Shame! 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 Shame!
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point, American Family Radio. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity and high-definition radio. More content per cubic inch of air. At least that is our goal from the hardest working man in conservative talk radio. At least that is my mission. That's my goal. If I don't hit it, it will not be for lack of effort. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable. As always, you're listening to Focal Point, and the network is American Family Radio Network. Now, as you're aware, we use a reading schedule and a prayer schedule you can find at pray.afa.net. Pray, then a dot, then AFA, then a dot, then net. Pray.afa.net. Scripture reading for every single day and a prayer that's rooted and grounded in the very words and themes of that passage of Scripture, so you not only can read through the Word of God, you can pray through the Word of God. And 3 years from today, if you start this morning, go to that website, bookmark it, open it up, start reading today at Psalm 58. You start today and you stick with it every day. 3 years from today, you will have not only read through the entire Word of God, you will have prayed the entire Word of God into the lives of the people that you love and care about. Now, we are in Isaiah 58 today, in which God talks about what a true fast is. Now, we've all had thoughts of fasting cross our mind. Some of us have actually done some fasting. Maybe you have. It might have been fasting for one meal a day. It might have been fasting for a period of days. It might have been a liquid fast. It might have been a weekly fast of some kind, or you might have taken on a longer fast, up to a 40-day fast, the kind we read about in the Scriptures. But the question to ask is, what makes a fast a true fast, and what makes it effective? You know, if we're going to fast, we want to fast for a reason. We want to fast because there's something we want to see happen for the sake of God's kingdom. When I was a pastor in Boise, we prayed together. Pastors in Boise prayed every Wednesday. Did this for, the last, 15 years. I was probably a pastor in Boise. I met with a group of pastors every week to pray for the city, for the valley, and we were praying that God would bring spiritual awakening to our value. And I fasted every Wednesday in conjunction with that prayer session. And it was for revival and spiritual awakening to come to the Treasure Valley and to the city of Boise. So the question is, what makes a prayer like that effective? And what can cancel out its effectiveness? What will make it essentially worthless? And you know, at the time of Jesus, they were scribes and Pharisees that fasted twice a week. I mean, they were religious about it, if you'll pardon the expression. They fasted on Mondays and Thursdays like clockwork. And again, they prided themselves on that. They wanted everybody to notice them that they were fasting. They would mark up their faces and wear kind of ratty clothes so everybody would know. Everybody would look at them and recognize, whoa, that guy is fasting. He must be a holy dude. And the question is, okay, what makes a fast effective and what makes it ineffective? That's what Isaiah talks about in Isaiah 58. And this is what he says about the people of his day. Cry aloud, he says this to Isaiah, cry aloud, do not hold back, lift up your voice like a trumpet to the people of Israel, he's saying, people of Judah, to the house of Jacob, declare to them their transgressions, declare to them their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the judgment of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. And they say to me, why have we fasted and you see it not? Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it? We have been fasting and we haven't gotten anything out of it. And here's what he says. This is what God says to him. Behold, in the day of your fast, you seek your own pleasure. You fast and then you go out and oppress all your workers. So you do some religious deal. You go to some kind of religious service. Maybe you do it regularly. Maybe you do it ostentatiously. Maybe you do it in a way that everybody around you sees it. But God says it's all canceled out if you go out of that religious thing, that religious meeting, that fasting, that prayer session, and you go out from there and you're mean to people, and you get into quarrels, and you get into fights, it cancels everything out. Those kind of fasts will absolutely cut no ice with God. You won't be heard. It'll be completely ineffective. He says in the end of verse 4, fasting like yours this day will not make your voice to be heard on high. That's why you fast. It's a way of turbocharging prayers. That's what fasting is really all about. You can kind of turbocharge your prayers by accompanying it with fasting. It's a way of communicating to God your intensity, your desire. You're willing to go without some earthly physical pleasure because there's something that matters to you more, and that's seeing the expansion of the kingdom of God. But God says that's got to be accompanied by a righteous life. Fasting without obedience is worthless. It accomplishes nothing. And he says, this is what you guys are doing. You make this appearance of seeking me, delighting in my ways. You're faithful at church, or you're faithful at Sunday school, or you're faithful in prayer services, but your heart is far from me. And even though you fast, I'm not impressed. It doesn't move me. It doesn't do anything in my heart. So Isaiah says, look, this is the fast that God chooses. A day for a person to humble himself before God. Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then, he says, shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. So fasting that's accompanied by generosity, by a spirit of peace, by a spirit of reconciliation, that kind of fasting will bring results from the hand of the Lord. Well, let's go to prayer for ourselves and for people we love. Sovereign Lord, I ask this day on behalf of myself, my family, the listening audience of Focal Point, everyone right now within the sound of my voice, pray for all of our elected officials and for our president, President Trump. I pray that you will use each of us this day in our spheres of influence to loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and satisfy their needs. Prompt us to share our food with the hungry, and to spend ourselves on their behalf. May we provide the poor wanderer with shelter, clothe the naked, and not run away from our own flesh and blood. May we do away with the yoke of oppression and with pointing fingers and malicious talk. As we do, I ask that you will cause our light to break forth like the dawn. May our light rise in the darkness and our night become like noonday. Amen.
When I first found out I was pregnant, I was surrounded by fear and disbelief. My boyfriend told me at the time to get an abortion. There was no negotiating.
This is the story of a young lady who decided to keep her baby after hearing her baby's beautiful heartbeat on ultrasound. The Ministry of Preborn provides ultrasounds for pregnancy centers across America for free. When an abortion-minded woman hears her baby's heartbeat on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
My son Rent turned 5 months this week, and even though there are still uncertainties in my life, the one thing I know is I get to watch him grow.
Your gift of $140 will cover the cost of 5 ultrasounds. All donations are tax deductible. To donate, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby.
A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Thanks to faster economic growth and a supportive atmosphere for scientific and technological innovation, the U.S. dethroned Hong Kong to retake first place as the world's most competitive economy, according to annual rankings by the Switzerland-based IMD World Competitiveness Center. The renewed top ranking aligns with the positive U.S. growth narrative over the past year. Venezuela is dead last in the world. The U.S. was followed in the rankings by Hong Kong, Singapore, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. But the United States is back where we belong, at number 1. I like it.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. This is interesting. Joe Biden and Barack Obama had lunch yesterday, and the media has gone absolutely bananas over this bromance between Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Joe Biden is making noises about running for 2020. As you know, a poll released today had him up by 6 or 7 points on Donald Trump. Of course, this far out, it's absolutely meaningless, but of course the Democrats are jumping all over that poll. They love it. They want Joe Biden. They would love for him to run for president. By the way, Barack Obama sort of getting back in the whole political thing. He endorsed 81 or 83 Democrats for the midterm elections. What was interesting is he did not endorse Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Did not endorse her. And it's interesting. I don't know if you read this story about Venezuela. See if I can find that story. What's going on in Venezuela? Here's a headline from yahoo.com. Remember, Venezuela, 100% socialist city. Hugo Chavez, socialist. Maduro, the guy that replaced him, socialist. Here is a piece in yahoo.com about San Juan, Venezuela, the Venezuelan city where nothing works anymore. Now, remember, this was once one of the 10 leading oil producers in the world. In fact, I think their oil deposits, proven oil deposits, are maybe the second or third biggest in the world. But socialism and capitalism, people have an incentive to work together with other people, with other businesses to get something done because it's in everybody's best interest. Free enterprise, where you're free to make whatever deals you want and do the work whatever way you want to do it. The incentive is to collaborate. It's to find a way to team up so we can both extract more natural resources or whatever the project happens to be. But when government is telling you what to do, they're trying to organize everything. There's really no incentive because government is running things. Government's telling you what to do and all of that. So when you have socialism, it disincentivizes productivity. It just doesn't happen. Now, here's what's going on. There are daily blackouts in San Juan de los Moros, Venezuela. Running water, you get running water once a month in this city right now. It's a city of 160,000, too. This is not some kind of rural outpost at some kind of remote valley. Cash machines are empty. You want to go to a ATM machine, nothing in it. If you want a bus, public transportation, you got to wait for hours before the bus shows up. Welcome to San Juan de los Moros in Venezuela, where nothing works. They often have no electricity for 24 hours at a time. There's a stench on every corner from the garbage and the waste. There's a profile here of one woman. She has to spend 25% of her income buying water just so they've got something to drink. Her daughter, who's going to medical school, has to go next door to borrow the internet. And the interesting thing about Venezuela, this is another thing, socialism just saps incentive, it saps drive, it produces. The people in Venezuela, they're not even protesting. I mean, they just seem like resigned to their fate, like very fatalistic about all this, like nothing can be done. It doesn't do any good to complain because there's nobody there to be able to hear and to respond. Everybody is dressed shabbily in this city because they can't afford decent clothes. Only way they get drinking water is to go to this tap in the middle of town. They got to make multiple trips every week, 2-3 times a week. And you can get a 100,000 Bolivar note. Bolivar is the currency in Venezuela. You get a 100,000 Bolivar note that used to buy 11 pounds of rice. You know how much you can get today for a 100,000 Bolivar note? That's enough to buy one cigarette right now today in Venezuela. They have a cap on what you can withdraw from the bank, 100,000 bolivars. That's half the price of a single egg. That's the most money you can withdraw in one single transaction. Buy half an egg with that. You know, you want to ride on the bus. This one girl, Carolina Azuaje, she's the medical student. She leaves at 6 o'clock in the morning to try to get on public transportation, but she literally has to fight her way onto the bus. Last week, she says, I broke a finger just trying to get on the bus. The wonders of socialism. So maybe Barack Obama knows what's going on in Venezuela, says maybe not a good time to endorse a Democrat socialist for government. You know, we've talked about these universal income projects. This is something that socialists, of course, are very fond of. And Stockton, California is trying this. It's $500 a month for doing nothing. Everybody gets it. Everybody that qualifies, everybody's in this program, they get $500 a month. They don't have to do a blessed thing for it. You know, Donald Trump we've seen the food stamp rolls drop by about 3 million people just since Donald Trump has been president because there is a work requirement. You got to be working 20 hours a week, you got to be looking for work, or you got to be training for work in order to qualify for food stamps. This is for able-bodied people up to the age of like 49 or whatever. And it makes a difference. 3 million people dropping off the rolls because the incentive is to get off the rolls and support yourself. Now, up in Ontario, Canada, they've been running a basic income pilot project, and they've just scrapped it because it did not work. It's not sustainable. They simply can't afford it. So they're cutting it off. They are shutting it down. It's very expensive, and the manager said it is clearly not the answer for Ontario families. Now, they had 4,000 people enrolled in this program, started in April of 2017, so been running it, what is that, about 15, 16 months, something like that. Supposed to go for 3 years, but they ran out of money. Now, a single person on this program could have received $17,000 a year without doing a thing. Now, if they made any money, they had to subtract half of whatever they made from that $17,000 a year. What kind of incentive does that provide for you to go to work? None. You go to work, it actually costs you money to go to work. So nobody's going to do that. A couple could have gotten up to $24,000 a year. People with disabilities could have gotten an additional $6,000. So what happened? They ran out of other people's money, and now they are done. That program is wrapping up the wonders of socialism. Let's see what else we want to talk about as we are starting the program. Just some kind of here and there political notes. Ted Cruz is up by 6. The latest poll in Texas over Beto O'Rourke, the guy that adopted a Mexican-American name. A guy is as Irish as you can get. His last name is O'Rourke. But Beto or Beto, however you say it, that's apparently a Spanish name, and he adopted that. I don't know what his real name is, but it's not Beto. So he wanted to kind of make everybody think, if they didn't look too closely, that he had Mexican heritage. Anyway, he's 6 points down to Cruz. Cruz is up 649-43. Now this Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, by the way, she's a socialist, but maybe a socialist in name only. That would be a sino, I guess, socialist in name only. She had 2 fundraisers in San Francisco yesterday, and at least one of them. In order to get into this fundraiser, you had to cough up $2,700. So that's a good capitalist move, not something you would expect a socialist to do, but that's what she's doing. So apparently there are some limits to her socialist convictions. And we may come back to a little bit more of this as the program develops, looking at the Mueller investigation. Right now, as you're aware, Paul Manafort is on trial. Paul Manafort is on trial for tax fraud and bank fraud. And all of the crimes with which he has been charged took place before the presidential campaign even started in 2016. So in other words, Paul Manafort, this is Mueller's first prosecution. This is the first case that he himself is actually prosecuting. And it doesn't have anything remotely to do with the election. Nothing. Zip. Nada. That's why Donald Trump is out there today sending a tweet out to Jeff Sessions. Look, you need to shut this. I call it a snipe hunt because there's no snipe in a snipe hunt. You got to shut this thing down right now. And by the way, the Mueller types are starting to use a new C word. Remember, we've seen collusion was used a lot. Now the word that they are using is conspiracy. That this whole thing is a conspiracy now. That's the word of choice now, that everybody conspired together to do whatever it was they did. So that now is, they've dropped collusion. They started off with Russia. That was the big word. Then they shifted to collusion, and that didn't work because there was no collusion. Then they tried obstruction of justice until they realized you can't get Trump on that, because if you fire somebody with constitutional authority, he's not obstructing justice. You can't convict the guy for exercising his constitutional authority. So now they've landed on conspiracy as the word that they are trying to use. So they're bouncing around trying to find some avenue, some lane that they can follow that's going to work, and they haven't found anything to be able to make it work. Now, Manafort, by the way, was investigated by the FBI a number of years ago, and they found nothing. Now, Manafort, that means Manafort is only in trouble now for one reason. He is connected to Donald Trump. That's his crime. He's connected to Donald Trump. So what Mueller's doing is trying to throw as much mud against the wall that Manafort is standing in front of, hoping that enough of it will stick that he can persuade a jury to make life look pretty miserable for Manafort, in the hopes that Manafort will somehow or other roll over on Trump and give Mueller some dirt that he can use on Trump. Whether Manafort's even got something like that. He only worked for 4 months on the Trump campaign. He was only a part of the campaign for 4 months. And remember, the work that Manafort did, he did in Ukraine. The people he worked with were in Ukraine. He was working with Ukrainians. He wasn't even working with Russians. And that's what he's being tried here for the work that he did with Ukrainians and for the country of Ukraine. So again, The witch hunt, the snipe hunt continues. Another tribute to the wonders of socialist governance in Chicago. This is Democrats. Daughter called. His dad was having a heart attack. And how long it took the ambulance in Chicago to get there? 43 minutes. Now, the fire truck got there in 9 minutes, but they got a rule there that a fire truck cannot take somebody to the hospital. So they got to sit there in the fire truck for 34 minutes waiting for the ambulance to come. Back in 2.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. As I told you yesterday, a very important conference on religious freedom around the world took place in Washington last week. Governments from around the world sent representatives to this 3-day conference convened by the Secretary of State Pompeo. Over 80 countries sent representatives to the summit on religious freedom around the world. The national media has given shamefully little coverage to this enormously significant event, which has the real potential to impact literally tens of millions of people's lives in an extraordinarily and extremely positive way. It is also one of those rare issues in today's culture on which the overwhelming majority of Americans agree: freedom of conscience and religion. This Religious Freedom Summit, officially called the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom, issued the Potomac Declaration, which quotes the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was ratified in 1948, and it says, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance, end quote. The preamble to the Potomac Declaration goes on to declare that today we are far from this ideal declared in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This right is under attack all around the world. Almost 80% of the global population reportedly experience severe limitations on this right. Persecution, repression, and discrimination on the basis of religion, belief, or non-belief are a daily reality for too many. It is time to address these challenges directly, end quote. More information about this urgent issue tomorrow. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent as always. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. The network is the American Family Radio Network. I want to welcome back to our decision maker line a guest that we've had on before. We're heading into the primary in Michigan, which I believe is next Tuesday. We'll get confirmation from our guest on that. But our next guest is Patrick Colbeck. He's a state senator in Michigan, and he's running for governor. He's got 3 other Republicans in the race that he's contesting with for the Republican nomination. Got a slate of Democrats on the other side. But want to welcome Patrick Colbeck, Senator Colbeck, back to our decision maker line. Welcome, Senator, to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Great to be with you. Again, Brian, I hope everything's going well in your neck of the woods.
It sure is, and we trust everything is going well with you. And am I right that the primary is next Tuesday?
You are absolutely right, August 7th. A lot of people have been voting already absentee, but the poll day is August 7th.
August 7th. Now, let me ask you this question. I have not seen very much polling data from the governor's race there in Michigan, but I understand that there are some dynamics that your campaign is sensing that create maybe a sense of optimism in your campaign that maybe things will go better for you than outsiders are thinking.
Absolutely. I mean, most people realize that whenever you mention poll, people take it with a grain of salt. It's almost become a laughingstock over the last couple elections. If you go to Real Clear Politics, for example, or 270 to Win, it'll list all the different polls from the 2016 presidential election. And out of all those polls in Michigan that predicted that Hillary Clinton would be the next president in Michigan. Only one of the polls, I think, on the day before the election predicted that Donald Trump would be president. And those are the polls that everybody has taken as gospel truth here, and they're basing their voting decisions based on those polls, and they're trying to use them now more as marketing materials than they are actual truth-telling devices.
Right.
We've taken a different approach. And so instead of the traditional approach, which actually calls people up on landlines and asks them to press 1 for one candidate, 2 for another candidate, we do something completely different. I've been working with a company called Evolution Consulting, and what they do is they scrape the publicly available information in the Internet. They look for specific phrases and sentiments and momentum in those phrases. They plug it into an algorithm, and they predict with this algorithm the results of an upcoming event, whether that event is an election or something else that may be of concern to them. And so what that predictive analytics approach has shown in the presidential election, the same predictive analytics approach predicted 8 months before the election that Donald Trump would win, and they're predicting that I will win the Michigan primary.
Wow. So that really is reason to, I guess, put the pedal to the metal in the stretch run here, as it looks like you're picking up momentum.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you can see it on the ground, too. And why this resonates with so many of our supporters, we got over 3,000 volunteers on the ground right now in Michigan. That's volunteers, not paid people, is because they're seeing it. They're seeing the yard signs. They're seeing people wear their buttons to church. They're seeing people wear their shirts to the grocery store and ask people if they heard about their next governor. And it is resonating. I've got an 80-year-old woman who I just found out had a stroke 5 weeks ago. 3 weeks later, she was out knocking doors on our behalf. I mean,
Wow.
That stuff doesn't happen on a typical campaign.
Yeah, that's some dedication there. Now, Senator Colbeck, talking over with Senator Patrick Colbeck of Michigan, the primary for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, for that matter, next Tuesday, August 7 in Michigan. So they're in the stretch run there. Now you have 3 other Republicans, Senator Colbeck, that are in the primary. How would you, if we have people from Michigan listening right now, you've got Brian Calley, who has been Lieutenant Governor of Michigan since 2011. You're in the race. We have Dr. Jim Hines. He's a medical doctor from Saginaw Township. And then you have Bill Schuett, who's been Michigan Attorney General since 2011. So a couple of very highly visible politicians are in the race. How would you tell Michigan candidates, how would you distinguish yourself from the other Republicans in this race?
Well, I would just share what I've been told, is that I'm the only one with solutions. There's a lot of debates, and I encourage everybody in Michigan that's going to be voting on this to just go watch the debates. I'm encouraging comparison shopping. And what I've been told time and time again is that, number one, I'm the only one who answers the questions that I'm asked. And number two, I'm the only one who actually provides solutions that are well thought out and detailed. And I think that's the big separator. Matter of fact, kind of ties into some of the discussion we had on polling. We had all the leading pollsters at an event last night in Michigan, and they all, of course, predicted I'm not going to do very well and all that, and they talked about why. But this event was moderated by a radio host that asked the question saying, well, you know what? We got over 100 people here. How about if we actually do a straw poll, informal poll of all the people that are present at this event? And this is not a loaded event for me by any stretch of the imagination. Over half the room was voting for me. And so there's something that is just not right. People sense it on the ground. People sense it when they watch the debates, because they'll watch these debates and say, Colbeck's the only one who answered the questions, yet the press releases will come out and say, oh, obviously the Attorney General is the one who won that election. It's all forced marketing. It's like flashing popcorn up on a screen. And there's obviously an attempt to kind of sway the voters without telling them the whole truth.
Now, Senator Colbeck, you are literally a rocket scientist, worked on, I believe, on International Space Station type technology for astronauts to be able to actually live in space. So obviously a bright guy. You've got a book out, Wrestling Alligators, and that sounds like, it sounds like you're dovetailing with President Trump's theme of kind of trying to drain the swamp. I mean, that's what you find in the swamp, or gators You've been wrestling with gators. What do you mean by that expression, wrestling gators?
Well, I was at a Heritage Foundation presentation a while back where I was asked to talk about healthcare, and Newt Gingrich was at this, and we were talking, and I asked him a question saying, hey, you know, when you're trying to drain the swamp, it really gets kind of nasty out there. And he comes back to me and he says, you know what? When you're draining the swamp, you really shouldn't be too surprised if the alligators start biting. and that's exactly what has happened here in Michigan. But it's because people have forgotten who they serve. That's the fundamental problem that we're having in politics today. And that's one thing President Trump gets. He's actually going off and listening to the people. You notice he was just out in Florida yesterday, and he's taking his message directly to the people outside of the filter of traditional media that you normally have. And I find that extremely refreshing, and I think a lot of people that resonate with my campaign resonate with that approach because that's what I've done ever since I started. I started out in the Tea Party movement, so that was before Donald Trump came on the scene. It was a bunch of people disaffected with politics, but man, Donald Trump has done a great job at focusing that message and highlighting that it really is a swamp that does need to get drained.
Yeah, I'm looking at a piece here from National Review Online. Senator Colbeck, I don't remember who wrote this piece. I lost the name of the author. Do you know who wrote the piece?
Stanley Kurtz.
Oh,
yeah, Stanley Kurtz.
Stanley Kurtz, all right. And the phrase here on page 2 is that you are the Ted Cruz. You've been branded the Ted Cruz of Michigan. So are you okay with that label?
Absolutely. It was the Democrats that actually called me the Ted Cruz of Michigan. But a lot of Republicans feel that way, too. I mean, sometimes Ted Cruz has a tough time finding lunch buddies up at the Capitol, even within his own caucus, because he will testify to the truth. Ted Cruz wrote a great book called The Time for Truth. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but in there, he had a chapter called Mendacity. And when I read that chapter, I actually woke my wife up. She had just gone to sleep, so don't get too upset with me. I woke her up and I said, you got to listen to this. And as we started reading it together, she goes, that is you to a T. So there is a lot of similarity there for sure.
Yeah. Now, there's also on the Democrat side, let's just for the sake of argument assume that you are successful by God's grace next Tuesday. And I want to ask you to close here in a minute, Senator Colbeck. We're just talking about the importance of faith in your life and how it shapes your approach to public policy and all that. But there is a candidate on the other side who is a Muslim. He's a young guy, 33. If he is successful, he would be the first Muslim governor in the history of the United States of America. And I understand, Senator Colbeck, you've been about the only one in the field that has been willing to raise some concerns about what it might mean to have someone who has an Islamic worldview managing affairs for an entire state government.
Well, I am the only one that actually called him out on it, and particularly around his associations with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a designated terrorist organization by majority Muslim and Arabic countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Nobody else is looking at this. I've signed a pledge to make sure that we do not promote Sharia here in the state of Michigan. Things like female genital mutilation, human trafficking, these are all things that are promoted under the guise of the country that the Muslim Brotherhood would like to make the United States look like. And I'm having nothing of it. And I think it's important that people understand that what his ascendancy to the governor would mean to the citizens of Michigan, but also to our country as a whole, because the stuff that they're promoting, that he would promote as with those Muslim Brotherhood ties, is not something that we need in America.
Senator Colbeck, we got about 45 to 50 seconds. Tell us about how your faith informs, shapes, affects your approach to public policy.
Well, first of all, when my wife and I first ran for office, it was more of a calling than anything else. This is not my favorite job that I've ever had. Matter of fact, I think it's safe to say it's my least favorite job. I was going to Nineveh. But I don't like fish, so I didn't want to get swallowed by a fish, and I knew that story, so I made sure that I just listened when God was pushing me out of there. That's what we focused on. My wife and I are so passionate about the calling that we've done. When we first ran for office, we liquidated our retirement savings, and you can't see me over the phone here, but I got a lot of gray hair. That's not what you do unless you feel called and convicted to do this. And you know what? Every single step of the way, God has provided. He has opened up the doors that need to be opened, and I'm confident he's going to do so on August 7th and November 6th.
Our guest has been State Senator Patrick Colbeck from the state of Michigan, a University of Michigan grad. Did I get that right, Patrick? You a Michigan grad and candidate for governor, be running in the Republican primary next Tuesday, August 7. And anybody within the sound of my voice in Michigan, want to encourage you to get involved, go out to vote. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but vote your values next Tuesday. Thank you, Senator.
Let's not forget that we worship not Elijah, we worship the God of Elijah and the son of the God of Elijah. And we need to stand on our mountain and let all the noise go away. And when the clouds have dissipated, we need to see Jesus only.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Someone Like You, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Quick item from England. You know, we followed the case of Tommy Robinson. He has been one of the boldest men in Europe. And he's a Geert Wilders type, different breed of cat, different personality, and all that kind of stuff. But he is absolutely unafraid to call out the religion of Islam for the danger that it represents to English society and to English security. And he, in that capacity, was broadcasting, like on Facebook, I believe, just a Facebook live stream from the front steps of a courthouse where 4 Muslims were on trial. They had been part of a rape gang, which are, it's disturbingly frequent in the UK, and most authorities there don't want to touch it because they're afraid they will be accused of being racists or Islamophobes or bigoted or hateful or something. So they don't do anything to try to stop these Muslim rape gangs, which are all over the place in the UK. In the city of Rotherham, there were like 1,400 young girls who had been abused by this rape gang in Rotherham, and the city council wouldn't do anything about it. There was a member of the city council that was trying to get their attention, trying to say, look, we've got a problem here. We have to move in on these guys. We have young English girls that are being taken advantage of or being exploited or being abused, and they wouldn't do anything. She was the one that got cashiered for being a whistleblower. So it's been swept under the rug, and Tommy Robinson doesn't want that to be swept under the rug anymore. This represents a real serious danger to the stability of the English culture, represents obviously a direct threat to young women in the United Kingdom and to the daughters and sisters of those who live in these families. And so he's trying to call them out and make the public aware of this. So he's broadcasting, live streaming on Facebook from the front steps of the courthouse where these guys are being tried, and the police came and arrested him. He's doing nothing but just talking about this court case, talking about who's coming into the courthouse, what the trial is about, and for that, he's the one that got arrested. They ran him down to the judge, and within a matter of hours, he was in prison, had been arrested, had been tried, had been sentenced to 13 months in prison, and had been incarcerated. All of this in a matter of 3 or 4 hours. So anyway, today he finally got released on bail. He got bail. They wouldn't give him bail before. Now he got bail today. And the judge who heard his appeal for bail and granted it said, look, this trial has to be done over. This was not a fair trial in any way, shape, or form. It was rushed, and I mean that is the least you could say about this. I mean, a whole thing lasted 4 hours, start to finish, and all of a sudden, with blinding speed, he's in prison. They've got his camera. They don't really have constitutional rights over there in England. That's part of the problem. There's no constitutional right to freedom of speech, for instance, so they can trash that. They do things that would be appalling to us, but they're doing it routinely over there because they don't have a constitution that protects that. So anyway, good news is that Tommy Robinson is now out on bail, but he's still going to have to face trial again probably in September. Now, I want to play a little montage here, switching back to politics in the U.S., about this new mental disorder. I mean, it's like a contagious mental disorder that is sweeping our land. You know, we've already got the Ebola virus of culture that's endangering our culture. That's the religion of Islam. Now, this is a mental disorder, a mental disturbance, a mental derangement that's likewise threatening the peace and stability of our communities. It's Trump derangement syndrome. And I want to give you a sample of what this sounds like. Now, here is Steve Schmidt. And the people on the left are celebrating this guy. He's a hero. He was the campaign manager for John McCain, which may tell you all you need to know about how deep his Republican and conservative convictions go. But he is leaving the Republican Party, apparently, in a very flamboyant fashion. And he's a talking head on MSNBC. And, of course, he vilifies Republicans and vilifies Donald Trump every chance he gets. And even in this little soundbite, I mean, he's talking about the Republican Party shrinking. I don't know where he's getting his information, but that simply is not true. Well, let's listen to the first example of Trump derangement syndrome illustrated by Steve Schmidt.
As the Republican Party is shrinking, as people like me are leaving, fervor for the leader is intensifying, but the strategic problem is that it's getting smaller. The smaller the party becomes, the more intense, the more extreme, the more devoted to its leader, but it's on a diminishing point of return on the curve. And that's Trump's fundamental strategic problem heading into 2020, is that overwhelmingly, the vast majority of Americans don't think he's doing a good job, think he's a bad president, think he's compromised by a foreign power, think he's dishonest, which he is, of course, think he's corrupt, which he is, of course, and thinks he's lawless, which, of course, he is.
Okay, so here's Steve Schmidt. The Republican Party is shrinking under Donald Trump. You know, it's a weird thing. He's talking at the same sentence, he says that fervor for Donald Trump is intensifying. People are getting more and more enthusiastic about Donald Trump. Had another rally last night in Florida. Very enthusiastic crowd as he's out there campaigning. And his endorsement, his presence, his campaigning for candidates makes a huge difference. I think it was down in Florida. Maybe it was another state, so I want to be careful about mentioning any names because it could be wrong. But Donald Trump going to this state, endorsing the guy and holding a campaign rally for him, boosted his polling numbers by 19% virtually overnight. So there's an energy and a power that Donald Trump releases into a candidate's campaign just with an endorsement and by his presence. So it's just odd that Steve Schmidt's talking about how this party's shrinking at the same time that fervor for the leader is increasing. And you see it each time he does one of these rallies. You see the kind of fervor that's out there for President Trump. And Steve Schmidt says a vast majority of Americans don't think he's doing a good job. Well, I don't know where he's getting that. I mean, his favorability rating across the country, Democrat, Republican alike, you poll them all, 48%, and it's getting better. That leaves 52% max who don't approve of the job he's doing. That's not a vast majority. So I don't know where Schmidt is getting his ideas there. And you look at his poll numbers among Republicans, he has the support of 88 to 90% of the Republicans that are out there. All right, so that's one example of Trump derangement syndrome. And, of course, you have Trump derangement syndrome. If you're deranged, mentally disordered, then you're not going to be thinking clearly. You're not going to be thinking in line with facts and all that kind of stuff. So here is a little montage of Democrats who are victims of Trump derangement syndrome. You will hear, first of all, from John Brennan, former CIA director. Then you'll hear from an unidentified male. You'll hear from Don Lemon, who's an anchor on CNN. You'll hear from Representative Adam Schiff of the House Intelligence Committee and our old friend Maxine Waters from California. We've actually got two clips of her and then another unidentified male. So here they are, Trump derangement syndrome in action.
This is nothing short of treasonous because it is a betrayal of the nation. He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy.
I think Donald Trump is a fascist. I think everything he stands for is disgusting.
That is pure racism. And the president is cynically using that racism to appeal to his base.
That is not what you see in a democracy. That is exactly what you see in authoritarian regimes.
They dare me to say impeach him. Today I say impeach 45. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
How can you enjoy a Mexican dinner as you're deporting and imprisoning tens of thousands of people who come here seeking asylum in the United States? Shame! 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 Shame!
You know, you think about it, how do you have a debate with people that are this emotional, that are this unreasonable, that are this irrational? You know, Maxine Waters saying you got to get in their face. You see them at a department store, you see them at a restaurant, you see them at a gas station. Form a crowd, surround them, and start pushing back on them and tell them they are not welcome. Now, somebody did that to Maxine. She called the police. So she can dish it out, but she obviously cannot take it. So that's what you're dealing with here. Now, here's clip number 3, the last of our clips on the Trump derangement syndrome. And this is Tucker Carlson making his comments about what we just heard.
To anyone who remembers the Democrats of the 1960s, the 90s, or even 3 years ago, it's all very confusing. That party is dead. It's been replaced by a new one whose entire platform could be say no to Trump. This isn't politics anymore. It's the world's dumbest religion.
The world's dumbest religion exemplified by the Democrat Party. You know, and the changes in the Democratic Party, very pronounced. You know, they fought McCarthyism in the 50s. Now they're avid proponents of McCarthyism. They want people outed if they're connected to Donald Trump, like people were outed when they were connected to communism. They used to advocate for free speech. Now they try to shut it down every chance they get through Twitter and Facebook and other ways. Their only policy position now is hatred of Trump, and whatever he's for, they're against. That's their whole public policy compass. He's for it, we're against it. He's against it, we're for it. You know, when Donald Trump called MS-13 animals, all of a sudden you got these op-eds about what wonderful young people and how much potential there were in these MS-13. We just got to channel that energy, and they could be perfectly good American citizens. You know, Stormy Daniels used to be a prostitute. Now all of a sudden she's a civil rights hero in the eyes of the left. We'll be back after the news. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power, so you know businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith, so we know Satan is watching us. Engage Magazine is for millennials by millennials, and it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Mexican officials say it's a miracle nobody was killed when a passenger jet crashed minutes after takeoff in the Mexican state of Durango. Eben Brown reports.
An Embraer jet flown by Aeromexico crashed just 6 miles beyond the runway at Guadalupe Victoria International Airport, but nobody was killed. Many escaped on their own.
It was a hole that opened, a hole right behind us, and that is where people were getting out. I unbuckled my son's seatbelt, and we got out that way. We jumped.
A large number of people were seriously injured and needed to be brought to a hospital. The plane had 4 crew and 97 passengers and was headed to Mexico City. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Senators are meeting with social media executives to learn more about how foreign nations spread propaganda online. More from Rachel Sutherland.
Senate Intelligence Committee ranking member Mark Warner says we're only scratching the surface of Russia's ongoing information warfare, pointing to Facebook's move to scrub suspected fake accounts.
The takedown of 32 new pages and accounts that had connections to Russian-backed operations.
Facebook has not directly pointed the finger at Russia. Warner said the committee plans to host executives from Facebook, Twitter, and Google at a hearing next month to find out what plans they have in place to deal with propaganda on their platforms. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
The trial for former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort on charges related to financial fraud is back underway. Peter Ducey has more outside the Virginia federal court.
The judge did scold the Mueller team for the use of the word oligarch. He said it has a pejorative meaning and they should stop it. All the arguments about allegations of falsified tax returns and bank fraud predate Paul Manafort's time with the Trump campaign, and the president's name has not been mentioned yet. So far this morning, the 2 witnesses have been a political consultant who did work with Paul Manafort in the Ukraine, and also the seizing agent who was present when the FBI showed up at Paul Manafort's house. He says that they did knock on the door and they used a key to enter the Manafort residence for a raid when nobody answered, but this FBI agent will not say where the FBI got the key.
Was the Me Too movement a cultural touchpoint that led to lasting change or just a flash in the pan? Steve Jordahl reports we could soon find out, as one of its accused says he might run again.
This was Al Franken after he was accused, but before he was drummed out of the Senate on the heels of several credible allegations of sexual misconduct.
To all of you, I just want to again say I am sorry. I know there are no magic words that I can say to regain your trust.
He's hoping maybe vote for me will work. Franken told a local Minnesota station he has not ruled out another political run. Resident Jan Markell of Olive Tree Ministries says for a liberal like Franken, Minnesota voters might just set aside their Me Too rage.
My hunch is these people will put politics ahead of their other movement that we're talking about here. Leftist politics in Minnesota are extremely important.
And she says it wouldn't be the first time he's asked the public to look the other way. There was controversy around his first election to the Senate as well.
He won by, I believe, a few hundred votes, which we think were clearly stolen. I mean, perhaps literally stolen. I think corruption surrounds the Democrat Party here in the state of Minnesota, and it's actually getting worse by the day.
In his interview with a local station, Franken says he misses his old job. Markell says not to rule him out.
I know he wants to get back into the public eye because that's where he's been his entire life, and I think he is longing for that to come back. So I would say he possibly could win.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Private survey finds that U.S. businesses added a healthy 219,000 jobs in July. Payroll processor ADP says hiring was led by healthcare providers, hotels and restaurants, and manufacturers. July's figure was up from 181,000 in June. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Kids have questions. In fact, they have some of the most challenging questions you may ever be asked.
Mommy, how do we know God is real? And why does he allow suffering?
Oh, hold on, baby. One question at a time.
Why not prepare yourself with the 21 Toughest Questions DVD set from Focus on the Family and the American Family Association? Dr. Alex McFarland offers insight and clarity to help parents communicate their faith to their children. Order yours today at afastore.net.
And Wolf, just to give you a sense as to what's happening right now, you can hear there is a chorus of boos and other chants from this Trump crowd here in Tampa, Florida.
They dare me to say impeach him. Today I say impeach 45.
To anyone who remembers the Democrats of the 1960s, the 90s, or even 3 years ago, it's all very confusing. That party is dead.
He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy.
I think Donald Trump is a fascist. I think everything he stands for is disgusting.
This isn't politics anymore. It's the world's dumbest religion.
That is pure racism. And the president is cynically using that racism to appeal to his base.
It's all very confusing. That party is dead. It's been replaced by a new one whose entire platform could be say no to Trump.
Shame! 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 Shame!
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, and amiable, as always, program is Focal Point, home of high-definition radio. More content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial. Don't forget that 1 week from today at this very time, you will be listening to Stacey Washington. Stacey on the Right is the name of the program. She'll be on in this time slot, second hour of the what used to be the 2-hour Focal Point program. They trimmed back to 1 hour next week. Stacey Washington will be behind the mic in the second hour, what used to be the second hour of this program. Her first day will be next Monday, Stacey on the Right. So I want to make sure you're prepared, ready for that programming change to take place.
And just a little sneak peek, we're going to have her on tomorrow at about 1:15, and you guys get a chance to talk about what people can expect from her show.
So you'll have a chance to meet her and find out what her program is going to be like if you haven't had a chance to listen to her. She's got she's been on our Urban Network, and she'll have a second hour right after her hour here. She'll have a second hour on the Urban Network that follows right after it. In fact, we're going to do both hours from the same studio for convenience. So if you like what you hear from Stacey, you'll have a chance to listen to her 2 hours every day if that is your choice. All right, so that'll be next Monday, and we'll have Stacey on tomorrow, so you have a chance to get introduced to her. You know, speaking of the media, and Jeff used a little bit of this in the audio teaser for the program, Jim Acosta went to the Donald Trump rally in Florida last night, and he's trying to talk to Wolf Blitzer and can barely be heard because everybody is standing around him talking about how CNN is fake news, CNN sucks, and all that kind of stuff. So here's Jim Acosta. Now remember, this is a guy that's always shouting at the president. This is a guy that doesn't like it when people shout at him, but he complains when Donald Trump doesn't like to be shouted at. And he's the one doing the shouting at President Trump. So here is Jim Acosta talking to Wolf Blitzer last night at the Trump rally in Florida.
And Wolf, just to give you a sense as to what's happening right now, you can hear there is a chorus of boos and other chants from this Trump crowd here in Tampa, Florida. They're saying things like CNN sucks, go home, and fake news. Wolf, obviously, all of those things are false. We're staying right here. We're going to do our job and report on this rally to all of our viewers here tonight. Wolf.
All of those things are false. CNN sucks. That's false. We do fake news. That's false. So I think there are a lot of people that were present at the rally last night who would beg to differ with him on that score. But here's an interesting takeaway from what happened last night. Did either of you guys see that?
I did.
See that?
I did. The Trump rally?
Yeah, the Trump rally.
I saw a good portion of it, yeah.
And did you see where Acosta was standing when he was doing that little stand up there?
No, I didn't. I didn't see
Well,
that.
he's standing there on a little platform, but he is completely surrounded by Trump supporters who were yelling all these things at him. But the thing that struck me is, you know, the people on the left, the media, like the Jim Acostas of the world and so forth, you know, they're out there all the time beating the drums about how dangerous Donald Trump is and about how his rhetoric is inflammatory and it's going to lead to a new civil war and it's going to lead to this outbreak of violence and we're on the verge of violence. Well, Jim Acosta is one of the guys that's saying that, but he doesn't believe it.
No.
He obviously is not in fear for his safety or his life.
He'd be in a bulletproof plexiglass cube or something.
He'd be in the Pope Mobile if he believed that.
Yeah.
So that, you know, it's just one of those little things that just gives the lie to this hysteria that the media is pumping out. He wasn't afraid for his life or his health or anything because they know that they realize from a Trump crowd they don't really have anything to fear. And yet, as we talked about yesterday, there have been 538 documented instances of physical assault against Trump supporters since the election. 538. And I don't know, maybe you could find one or two or three out there that were from a Trump supporter against a supporter of Hillary Clinton or a Democrat or whatever, but very rare in comparison. Now let's grab clip number 5. This is Ken Delanian. He is the national security reporter for NBC, and he's talking about the Manafort trial, which started yesterday. In fact, today they're going to interview a suit maker. Yeah, I kid you not. You know, he seems to be on trial, Manafort does, for living a luxurious lifestyle. It's like he's on trial for making too much money. Well, where is that a crime? You know, so they're actually bringing the guy that makes his suits for some reason is going to be testifying today. So it's just a bizarre thing to me what's going on, and you know, an indication to me that they really have nothing. They're just completely out in the weeds on this whole deal. But here is. Let me get to that clip here again. Here is Ken Delanian from NBC talking about the first day yesterday of the Manafort trial, clip 5.
Because this guy's been a fixture of American politics since the 1970s, and it's kind of a Shakespearean tragedy because the Justice Department investigated him years ago, took a pass, didn't pursue this case. The only reason he's wearing green jumpsuits today is because he went to work for Donald Trump.
The only reason, I mean, that's revealing. This guy's at NBC. This guy's not at Fox. This guy's not the reporter for Focal Point reporting into us his point of view. This guy works for NBC News, which, as you are aware, stands for nothing but counterfeit news. That's NBC, nothing but counterfeit news. And he says, look, what's going on here is a Shakespearean tragedy with Paul Manafort. He reminds us that the Justice Department investigated Manafort years ago, didn't find anything to prosecute. Nothing. Got a total clean bill of health. And now all of a sudden he's wearing a green jumpsuit, and Ken Delanian says there is one reason and one reason only why he is possibly headed for prison, and that's because he worked for Donald Trump, like for 4 months in his campaign, and then was gone. But that was enough to get him in the crosshairs of Bob Mueller, and now he's in danger of going to prison. So it's just kangaroo court here, ladies and gentlemen, from one place to the next. Now here is Jonathan Turley. We don't have time. Yeah, we do. Jonathan Turley talking about the Paul Manafort trial. Let's play clip 6.
A victory in the Manafort trial is not necessarily a big victory for the investigation per se. It is not connected to the campaign. It's a conventional prosecution. Doesn't mean that he's innocent, doesn't mean he shouldn't have been prosecuted, but it doesn't say that much about the investigation. In terms of obstruction and collusion, I don't think the ball has moved materially closer to Trump.
So Jonathan Turley, this Manafort trial is not connected to the campaign. Did you hear him say that? That's a quote. The Manafort trial is not connected to the campaign. Doesn't really have anything to do with the investigation that Mueller was chartered to pursue. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
I talked about my new book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records, or EHRs, on a podcast hosted by 2 cardiologists. They titled the episode, The EHR Will See You Now. That's one danger I write about. Outsiders using the government-imposed EHR to take control of doctors and treatment decisions. After answering their questions about dangers from the EHR in exam rooms and hospitals, they asked for solutions that offer hope for the healthcare situation today. I proposed lifelong health insurance purchase pre-birth, the end of managed care, and the Wedge of Health Freedom, our initiative to free patients and doctors found at jointhewedge.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Welcome to the AFA Spotlight. I'm Jim Stanley, General Manager of AFR, and we have a lot of divisions here at AFA. This week, we're shining the spotlight on American Family News.
Hi, this is AFR News Director Fred Jackson. More than 20 years ago, AFA's founder Don Wildman came to the realization that the message of conservative Christian America was being dismissed by the mainstream media. And so that's how American Family News was born. Well, since that time, God has brought together a team of reporters and anchors and editors whose daily mission is to produce newscasts that give our supporters not only the latest breaking news from around the country and the world, but also to give special coverage to news of particular interest to Christians, all of that from a biblical perspective. Over the years, we've taken our radio product and we now use that material to create a news website, onenewsnow.com, and we regard it as a privilege to serve God in this fashion.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, program Focal Point Network American Family Radio. Donald Trump said he was going to sanction Turkey for imprisoning Pastor Andrew Brunson, and he made good on his promise yesterday. There were 2 people from Turkey that got sanctioned by the Treasury Department yesterday. Let's see, trying to see if I can get the details on this story. The U.S. Department of Treasury sanctioned 2 Turkish officials on Wednesday, that would be today, at the direction of President Trump for their direct role in the arrest and detention of Pastor Andrew Brunson. All right, so what that's, you hit somebody on the wallet. I mean, you hit them where it hurts, and that's what Trump is doing using the Department of Treasury. So he's going to bat. It's not just feel-good speech that Trump has given about going to bat for Pastor Brunson. He's genuinely going to the mat for the guy. That's very, very good. Now, you might have seen this picture of the polar bear that looked like he was in the death throes.
Oh, remember that? I remember that. It was a real skinny polar bear.
Yeah, a real skinny polar bear.
Right.
Looked like he was starving to death.
That was pretty famous at one time.
Very famous. It just went viral everywhere. And his condition was blamed on climate change. Mm-hmm. And now the photographer has come out and said, I don't have any reason to believe that bear's condition was connected to climate change at all. I don't have any proof that he was dying from climate change whatsoever. Contributing photographer Christina Mittermeier is the one that was saying this. This is what climate change looks like, but now they're saying, you know, and National Geographic issued kind of a sort of correction to the story to just kind of minimize the claim, simply saying National Geographic went too far in drawing a connection between climate change and a particular starving polar bear. So they're retracting that as evidence of what climate change does to wildlife. Now, let's see where we want to go next. Let me do this Supreme Court story about Brett Kavanaugh, first of all. It's a strategy on the part of the Democrats because they simply have no way to stop him. They don't have the votes to stop him. It looks like Kavanaugh's probably going to get 54 or 55 votes. Joe Manchin is a pro-life senator from West Virginia. I mean, West Virginia supports Donald Trump like by a 46-point margin. I mean, his victory in West Virginia was absolutely overwhelming. And so anybody from West Virginia that's running for office got to be real careful about bucking Trump on somebody that he's nominated to the Supreme Court. So their plan, and Dianne Feinstein and others have sort of revealed us under questioning, that their strategy is to try to see every document that has crossed Brett Kavanaugh's desk while he was working for President Bush as Bush's secretary from 2003 to 2006. Now, he was the gatekeeper for every document that was headed for President Bush. President Bush didn't see one single document that hadn't passed through Brett Kavanaugh's fingers and across his desk. He was the guy to make sure that the only stuff that went to President Bush was stuff that he really needed to see. Winnow out the extraneous fluff and get him the stuff that as president of the United States he really needed to see. Well, that's a lot of paperwork. And they're claiming that somehow he wasn't a judge at this point. Kavanaugh wasn't. He was a secretary, criminally, to the President of the United States. So they're trying to claim that they have got to see all of these documents in order to make an intelligent judgment about Brett Kavanaugh. It is just a stalling tactic. So we'll see how successful they're going to be at pursuing that tactic. Here's just a kind of a little kind of fun story. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw this. This is not a fun story if you live in Sweden, but the crown jewels were stolen in Sweden from a cathedral there, and the thieves made off in a motorboat, and they were chased by the cops in a motorboat. You know, it sounds like an opening scene from a James Bond movie.
It does.
To me, exact same deal. I don't even know if the cops caught up to him. Here's a story. I think this is from Michigan. 2 sets of 24-year-old identical twins. 2 sets now. 2 male twins. 2 female twins. Identical twins. They had their first date together. The 2 twins, the 2 male twins, dated the 2 female identical twins. Their very first date was together. The first date with each other was as a group of 4, and they became engaged at the same time. They met in a psychology class, it turns out, where the prof of the psychology class said, you know, one of the things that psychologists specialize in is identical twin studies, because it can be very revealing. Do we have any twins in the house? Big lecture room. And, of course, these 4 were the only ones that raised their hands. All of them were in that psychology class at the same time, so they couldn't help but notice each other, because they're the only 4 people in the room with their hands up. So naturally, just out of curiosity, they meet after the lecture, and they wind up going out on a double date for the first time. They got engaged at the same time. Now they're going to all 4 of them are going to tie the knot this weekend, and then they're going to live together in a 2-bedroom apartment. One couple is going to get married on Friday night. The second couple is going to get married on Saturday, and then they're going to move into the same 2-bedroom apartment together.
I can see this being a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah, it does. That's a Hallmark movie, isn't it?
It's Hallmark.
Yeah, from start. They've all got the script written. You know, they don't even have to hire a scriptwriter.
I do have one question about this. I mean, how good is this professor, this college professor, if he's teaching about twin studies, if he has to ask the question for them to raise their hands? I mean, can't he just see? I mean,
well, I see two there and two there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, you know, this
That's
is
a good question.
This is actually a winnable war moment for the day. You know, we have complained about Netflix. We've encouraged you to sign our petition to them about the series 13 Reasons Why, second season of that, just kind of highlighting and glorifying suicide. I mean, that's a climax of season 1, is a girl committing suicide in the bathtub. And we had a guest on this program, Patricia Bright. Her daughter mimicked the suicide scene in 13 Reasons Why, binge-watched it one weekend, committed suicide after she'd binge-watched the whole thing. So just terrible piece of media propaganda. And so we encourage you to get hold of Netflix and complain. They have been undeterred to this point. They're just plowing right ahead. I mean, they're working on a third season of 13 Reasons now, but maybe we're getting through to them because they were planning to screen a Louis Farrakhan documentary, and they're not doing it anymore. That plan is off the table. They've scrapped it. They've canceled it. Not going to do any Louis Farrakhan. This is a guy that referred to Jews as satanic, used the expression the satanic Jew. He hates white people. I mean, this guy is an absolute undiluted racist. I mean, from stem to start, he is a racist. And so Netflix apparently thinking, hey, we don't want to tangle with those folks from the American Family Association again. I'm not saying that was their reasoning, but at any rate, that's good news that they've called off the Louis Farrakhan documentary. Speaking of another blatant instance of racism, in South Africa, the government there, the parliament there, is leading the charge to amend the South African Constitution to make it constitutionally permissible, actually to grant a constitutional right to take farmland from a white farmer with no compensation. You can just go take his farm because he's white. Might have been in his family for 400 years. A lot of the Dutch, a lot of the Boers there have been farming on the same land for 400 years. You know, there's a statute of limitations on this stuff at some point. But they're all going to be deprived of their farmland without any compensation. A lot of these farmers are seeking refuge in places like Russia and other places just to save their lives and the lives of their families. Well, that is just absolute blatant racism, and it's in South Africa. If you're white, they can take land from you with no compensation whatsoever. That's a decision that is based entirely and purely on race, not based on the law. It's not based on justice. It's not based on what's fair. It's based on skin color, and that makes it racism, plain and simple. So that's going on down there in South Africa. Here's kind of an odd story. This is a Scottish university in Scotland, and they have expelled a Catholic chaplain from this Catholic university, and he's being expelled because he's too Catholic. Catholic university, Catholic priest, he's being expelled from his job, fired from his job. I think it's voluntary, but fired from that position for being Catholic. Now, it's an obscure state-funded Scottish university, but this Glasgow Caledonian University, they expelled their Catholic chaplain for conducting an off-campus prayer meeting in response to a gay pride parade. So the chaplain said, look, this is not good, this gay pride parade. It's honoring, it's glorifying that which is an offense to God. We need to have a prayer meeting to pray against the spirits that are animating this parade and pray against the entire homosexual agenda. So he did. He held it off campus, and it was conducted inside his church, not on the campus, but 3 miles away from the campus. But school administrators found out about it, and they cashiered him from his job of hosting a prayer meeting to pray about a contemporary issue and prayed that the moral values of Roman Catholicism would be observed in their community. And that is now apparently a fireable offense in the country of Scotland. You know, Scottish Catholics make up 16% of the Scottish population, but they are the victims of 57% of religiously aggravated hate crimes. So you can add this priest to the list of Scottish Catholics who have been the victims of hate crimes. Maybe for the next chaplain, they need to put out a addition to the sign, Catholics need not apply. Back in 2.
Netflix continues to ignore the outcry about 13 Reasons Why. The American Family Association, along with Parents Television Council and several other pro-family groups, have reached out to the streaming service urging the cancellation of their program. Netflix has not even responded to our letter. Instead, they released an even more vile Season 2 and are producing Season 3. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings says their program is engaging and that it fosters discussion of taboo topics like suicide and sexual assault. But at what cost? 14-year-old Anna Bright and several other teens have committed suicide after watching the show. Hastings calls our objections propaganda. Does he feel the profitability of his company is worth more than the lives damaged or lost because of his show? Please sign our petition to Netflix, learn more, and share our action alert when you visit afa.net. And pray Reed Hastings will recognize the dangers of 13 Reasons Why.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. Since Hurricane Katrina, 8 Days of Hope has loved and served people in need all over the country. In fact, we've had about 35,000 volunteers travel with us to love and serve people in need. In March, we were in Houston to help out Hurricane Harvey survivors rebuild their homes after the flooding that happened there last fall. Hundreds of thousands of families needed help then, and still today the need is there. We're looking for volunteers to go back with us. 8 Days of Hope 16 will be happening in Southeast Houston, October 13th through October 20th. You can come for 3 days or all 8 days. It's free. We provide the food and lodging. If you can carry drywall, make sandwiches, pick up people from the airport, or deliver materials to the job site, we'd love for you to consider coming with us to Southeast Houston in October. 8 Days of Hope 16, October 13th to October 20th. Come and help us and be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Learn more and sign up to be a part of 8 Days of Hope 16 in Houston, Texas at 8daysofhope.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. We'll take your phone calls in the last segment, so I'll get that number out. Try to get that number out before the end of this segment so you can call up, get in the queue. We'll take as many calls as we can in that last segment. You know, we followed pot on this program because pot's one of those things that is becoming legalized in state after state. It was legalized for medicinal purposes. I'm looking at a story here, if I can find it in my stack, but there is no scientific or medical evidence whatsoever that marijuana has any medicinal benefits at all. Now, there's anecdotal evidence. There are people that will talk to you about the relief they get from smoking pot, from pain or whatever, but there's no medical studies that verify it. And up in Oregon, and you know, and one of the things we said from the beginning is I think this whole business to legalize medical marijuana was just as a gateway to recreational marijuana. That was the whole point of it. It wasn't really to help sick people. It was to give healthy people a legal excuse to toke up. And now Oregon, I think, is providing all of the proof that we need. Oregon legalized medical marijuana back in 2014, And now, 4 years later, there are only 3 medical-only processors left in the entire state. Now, at the height of the medical marijuana industry in 2016 in Oregon, there were 420 dispensaries in Oregon that were dispensing medical marijuana. You know how many are left today since they legalized recreational marijuana? 8. 8 medical dispensaries left standing. So the medical marijuana market has been going through the basement since they legalized it in 2016. So recreational marijuana has turned into a $1 million industry in Oregon, while the personalized patient grower network of the medical program has dried up. And of course, the bulk of users actually were recreational users who were masquerading as if they had some kind of medical condition. So that's what's going on up in Oregon. Let's see if there's anything else interesting about marijuana from this story. Oh, yeah, this is interesting. Since the broader legalization of marijuana took effect, large quantities of marijuana from Oregon have been seized in 30 states. 30 states, most of them prohibit marijuana, and supplies make it from Oregon to these 30 different states where it's sold on the black market. Speaking of pot, Molson and Coors, Molson's a Canadian brewer, and Coors, of course, is an American. They've joined, combined, merged, I guess is the term I'm looking for. They are now making a cannabis, they're in the process of making a cannabis-infused drink. So it's going to be non-alcoholic, but it's going to be infused with pot. And Molson or Coors or both are going to sell this thing. And maybe it's because they read a story that about a study that Georgia State did in 2017 that indicated that alcohol sales dropped by 20% in states that legalized marijuana. In other words, a lot of people, 20% of the people, would rather smoke weed than drink a beer. So alcohol sales went through the basement. So Molson and Coors evidently preparing for that day. All right, let's get to some immigration stuff. Donald Trump is out there again talking about the possibility of shutting down the government if he doesn't get funding for the wall. And I've got several clips on this topic. And this is a great one. Molly Hemingway, clip number 7, she dials this thing right in. What you're about to hear, ladies and gentlemen, is where the conflict in immigration really lies. And the conflict, ladies and gentlemen, is not between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Listen.
I think this is an issue where you're just seeing huge division, particularly on the Republican Party. You have the donor base that very much wants to continue the immigration policy as it has been. You have a voter base that has gotten rather sick and tired of continuing those things and not dealing with some of the systematic problems with our immigration policy. So it's hard to say how it plays out because you have a divided group here, the donors versus the voters.
That's it. There's your division on immigration. Pure and simple. It has nothing to do with Democrat versus Republican. It's Republican versus Republican. It's the donor base. They want open borders. They don't want a wall. You want to know why Mitch McConnell is saying we're not going to have a shutdown over the wall? Paul Ryan said we are not going to have a shutdown over the wall. It's because they get too much money from business interests that don't want a wall. They don't want border control. They want cheap labor. And they don't care if that cheap labor is bad for the country. They don't care if these drugs that are come across are trashing communities. They don't care if MS-13 comes across the border, sneaks in, and kills people, knifes them to death, cuts their heads off. They don't even care about that stuff. They just want cheap labor coming across the border. So they oppose Donald Trump's wall. They oppose border security. This is just a classic. And she says, look, what this is about, it's about the donors versus the voters. The donors are with Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. The voters are with Donald Trump. That's why I think if Donald Trump, remember 88% of Republicans are with Donald Trump, and a good part of it is because of his position on immigration and on the wall. They want that wall built. I believe if Donald Trump did this, it would be immensely popular among his base, among the voter base, and that's the base that counts. Why? Because we're the ones that elect people. Donors don't elect people. Voters do. But anyway, I thought that was just a pretty telling. It's a donor base versus the voter base. That's a good little template. Keep that in your mind. Every time the topic of immigration and border security comes up and a border wall, that's the tension right there. Donors versus voters. So this is Trump versus the swamp. The swamp consists of McConnell and Ryan and the donors that want open borders for cheap labor, selling out their country, putting their national security at risk simply for the sake of cheap labor. Now here is Jim Thune, senator from North Dakota. And again, this is a senator. This guy's like third in command in the Senate. So he is hip deep in the swamp, up to his earlobes. And he's talking here about the wall and the possible shutdown.
I'm with the president on supporting the wall. I offered the amendment in the last immigration bill in 2013 to build 700 miles of wall. It got 38 votes in the United States Senate, which at that time, of course, was controlled by Democrats. And we did have a debate, as you know, earlier this year. We had a series of votes on different immigration proposals, none of which got the necessary votes to pass. But I do think that the issue continues to boil. The need for the wall is critical, and we want to help the president achieve that objective. But I don't think the best way to do that is by shutting the government down. It just seems to me, at least, that could be very counterproductive, particularly when you're only a month away from an election.
Well, you know, he says that that's not the best way to do it. Well, Senator Thune, tell me what is. That's the only way it's ever going to get done. You are never going to get a wall. You're never going to get funding for a wall. Trust me on this. Do not doubt me on this, ladies. The only way you are going to get funding for a wall is through a shutdown. Going to have to be Donald Trump holding the Congress hostage until he gets the money that he wants. I am not going to sign that spending bill unless you give me funding for the wall. And now they're all moaning, where are we going to get the money? It's $25 billion. That's chump change up on Capitol Hill. And again, we've talked about the fact you can get it from remittances to Mexico. $25 billion a year going to Mexico, 4% tax, that's $1 billion a year. You can build your wall with the tax, 4% tax, not even a big tax, on remittances. I had one other thought that I was going to, yeah. The guys called me out on saying that he was hip deep up to his earlobes. Well, the guys forced me to do this. I'm sorry, I didn't want to reveal this about Senator Thune, but he had a birth defect, and his ears, instead of growing on the side of his head, they grew at the top of his leg. So he's hip deep up to his earlobes. Yeah. That's my story, and I am sticking with it. You know, and keep him in your thoughts. That's a kind of a terrible condition to have to live with. I think you should
hang on to it. It's like rocket surgery. That's a favorite of the executive producer.
Hip deep up to his earlobes. Hip deep up to his eyebrows.
In rocket surgery. Yeah. He was hip deep up to his earlobes.
There you go. You know, I had that interview with Senator Patrick Colbeck, who literally is a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
And I had Debbie begging me, when you interview that guy, please, whatever you do, don't use the expression rocket surgery.
I thought it was going to be a real challenge for you because rocket surgery has been coming out so natural for so long. I thought you were going to slip up there, but you didn't. You did. You made it.
Had somebody else, again, correcting me on Facebook. Come on, you idiot. It's not rocket surgery. It's rocket science. So I said, yeah, I invented that phrase. Only they already had it.
So everybody will say, it's not that.
It's not that. Come on. Get your mind right. All right, we'll take your phone calls. The number to call if you want to be a part of our conversation in the last hour is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Talk about anything that we have talked about on the program today. We've talked about fasting. We've talked about the Manafort trial and how it's got nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion. We did an interview with conservative state senator Patrick Colbeck on his run for governor. We've talked about this new disturbing mental disorder, Trump derangement syndrome. We've talked about how Jim Acosta loves to yell at Trump but doesn't want anybody yelling at him, and so forth and so on. So you are welcome to give us a call. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. We'll be back with your call.
Exposing Washington reveals the deception that plagues our nation's capital.
The mainstream media refuses to tell the truth of what's really happening.
Exposing Washington brings clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C.
The American people must stay informed on what our government is doing.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman brings you the inside scoop of what's happening in our nation's capital.
We must take our country back.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Who is God? What's He like?
How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back. Brian Fisher is my name. Program Focal Point Network, American Family Radio. Number to call is 888-589-8840. Love to get you on the program here in the last segment, 888-589-8840. Got one more soundbite I want to play for you. This is Richard Shelby, senator from Alabama. Again, we just saw Senator Thune. Well, yeah, I'm with the president. I support the wall. Need for the wall is critical. I believe that. We want to help the president achieve that, but this is one of those statements where you can forget about everything that comes in front of the but. When somebody throws that adversative in the middle of a paragraph, you might as well just forget the first half of that paragraph exists. Means absolutely nothing. The but cancels everything out that comes before it. It says, I just don't think the best way to do it is a shutdown. Well, Senator Thune, the only way to do it is through a shutdown. All right, this is Senator Richard Shelby. This is, again, another swamp dweller who wants to make noise about supporting the president on the wall. Let's listen.
Now, I share some of the president's concern about the border. We have not protected our border for 30 or 40 years, and it's gotten worse and worse. And He wants more money. We don't know where we can get the money, but at the same time, that will be something we'll have to work out between the House and the Senate. But right now, we're going to continue to work the appropriation process and try to avoid the specter of a shutdown come October the 1st.
Senator Shelby, does this put more pressure on you and your colleagues, the threat of a shutdown, the president willing to put that out there as where he's willing to go if you guys aren't successful? Do you feel more pressure as a result of that threat?
Well, pressure works. I guess fear works at times with all of us. But we all fear a government shutdown, and we should try to avoid it, and that's what we're trying to do. Maybe the president's sending us a message.
All right, so I don't think the Republicans wanted Richard Shelby to admit that pressure works on us and fear works on us, but never forget that. This is something we're going to remember here on Focal Point. Pressure works with our legislators. Fear works with our legislators. When they hear from us, they pay attention because they're afraid of losing their seat, and we're the ones that can take it away from them. So fear works, and they fear a government shutdown. What are they telling Donald Trump? If you want to get something out of us, shut down the government, and we'll give you whatever you want because we're deathly afraid of a government shutdown. All right, that's Richard Shelby, senator from Alabama. All right, let's go to Craig in Kentucky. Craig, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, Brian. I just want to say thank you for what you do, and I listen to your show on a regular basis. So you talk about good points, and it's good that people are listening. Just real quick, want to talk about just make a few comments about the legalization of marijuana. Very, very controversial subject. The first one really is the alcohol effects on us as human beings versus the effects that marijuana has on us as well. Unfortunately, I've lived a pretty rough life up until a few years ago, and then I was saved by God's grace. But I've experienced both alcohol and marijuana, and alcohol by far has a much detrimental impact on your health as well as your personality. Your relationships with others, and whatnot, versus marijuana use. I'm not by no means justifying it, but we do have, alcohol is widespread in this country. We have serious problems with alcohol. Marijuana's just starting the tip of the iceberg, really starting to come to a head. And as you had spoke about earlier, there are states that, Coors and that Canadian company, they're looking to infuse some cannabis because they realize that people would rather smoke than drink alcohol, which might not necessarily be a bad thing, just because, you don't hear about men coming home, or women, coming home drunk, beating on their spouse or the kids or anything like that. You don't hear about that with marijuana. Most of the time people want to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos or something along those lines. And so then my second comment really is marijuana's been around, since we were cultivating crops. It occurs naturally on God's earth. And there is some use for it. To what extent, we don't really know for sure. But God definitely has, put it on this planet for some reason or another. That's something for us to figure out. You can't really overdose on it. You could consume as much as you want, and it's not going to kill you. Just make you go to sleep. And then the economic impact, we can see some significant economic impact in agriculturally rich states as far as industry goes. I'm from Kentucky, and they last year, the year before, they legalized some farmers to cultivate marijuana for hemp. And so there is some impact not only on the recreational side of it, but for the hemp use of it. Everything used to be made from hemp before we used plastic. And of course, plastic comes from oils, oil, which is a finite resource. And, you can continue to grow marijuana. And then also pharmaceuticals. I mean, there's a lot of drugs that pharmaceuticals make that they have different effects on different people, not always the best. So, that's something to consider as well with marijuana use. being able to legalize it and the FDA being able to test it, effectively and not having all that lobby from the pharmaceutical companies, up against that, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of money pushing against cannabis when there could be some real value to it to some degree. So it's not like acid or any kind of hallucinogen. It's I don't even know what they consider it, but it's more like just a relaxing drug, more like a muscle relaxer to an extent or something along those lines.
Oh, well, thanks for the call, Craig. I appreciate that. It is still a Schedule I drug, according to the federal government, and I think that's where it belongs. I appreciate what you're saying. I've heard this line of argument a lot. I just have a different way of looking at it, Craig. Some of the studies I've read indicate that marijuana use, particularly in teenagers, is harmful to their brain development, and the more they use as teenagers, the worse it is, the more damage it does. And that's when people get interested in weed when they're teenagers. That's when they want to smoke it. And the earlier they start and the more they smoke it, the more damage it does to their brain. I mean, it affects IQ, it affects long-term memory, it affects the decision-making part of the brain, slows the way that part of the brain functions. So I am just not a fan of legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes at all. I'm open to the possibility of medicinal use because there's a lot of drugs, pharmaceuticals, like you pointed out, Craig, that we use that we would not want people using recreationally. That's how we got the opioid epidemic. There are places where that could be helpful for pain relief and so forth. We just don't want people using it for recreational purposes. And so I'm open to the possible medicinal use of pot, but the research I've seen indicates that there isn't any medically or scientifically verified medical use for it. And given that, Craig, I'm going to have to continue my position of opposing it. And the kind of pot that's being used today, it's not the kind of pot that my classmates toked up in college. I mean, this is multiple times stronger, a much higher THC content, the active ingredient. We've done stories on this program about people who actually have psychotic episodes on this new and improved and more potent marijuana. Everybody says, well, marijuana just zones you out. It just relaxes you. We've had stories where men have actually killed their wives when they got tanked up on marijuana. You wouldn't think it would happen, but with the higher THC content, that is something that can happen. All right, Craig, listen, I appreciate the exchange of views there. Let's grab a call from Charles, Princeton, West Virginia. Charles, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hello, Brian. I've been a listener at your program for at least 7, maybe 8 years. And when I heard that I'm retired and my day stops from 2 to 4 Eastern, and when I heard you were going to lose the last hour, I was devastated. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Stacy has to say on that last hour of your program. And the second point I want to make, I want to thank you for bringing up that South African issue with the white farmers. That is just awful. And I don't know what we can do about it, but something needs to be done about it.
Well, there's probably very little that we can do. It is awful. It's terrible. I mean, the violence, this happened in Zimbabwe back around the year 2000, I think it was. Same thing. White farmers lost land that had been in their families for literally hundreds of years. There's nothing equitable about that. There's nothing just about that. There's nothing fair about that. It's just outright racism. And a lot of it was accompanied by violence. I mean, farmers were being murdered, their entire families, in their farmhouses. The same thing is going to happen in South Africa. A lot of South African farmers are already leaving their farmland. Again, as I say, in some cases, land that's been in their families for generations. All right, Charles, appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's grab a call from Debbie in Washington Courthouse, Ohio. Welcome, Debbie. What's on your mind?
Hi, nice to talk to you. First time caller, but not first time listener. I've been listening to you ever since I can remember. I drive to Columbus, Ohio every day to work, and I listen in the morning to programs, and I listen to you in the afternoon on the drive home, and probably over 10 years. But anyway, I'm going to miss you on that second half. That's the only time I get to listen to you. So I thank you and all your people there for everything you do, and God bless all of you. That's all I need to say.
All right, Debbie, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you. And so what I'm going to try to do with 1 hour starting Monday, I'm going to try to talk fast. And so, Debbie, that means you got to listen fast. So we got to have everybody get their ears on and listen as quickly as you can. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. God bless you. We'll see you back here tomorrow. We're fighting a winnable war.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio. Faith,